Welcome to Gold Derby. I'm senior editor Denton Davidson here with Marielle Heller, the writer and director of Nightbitch, starring Amy Adams. First off, I mean, the title just feels nice to say sometimes,
I
Nightbitch.
agree. It always does feel nice to say.
How does that term resonate with you? And, what initially drew you to Rachel Yoder's book?
Obviously, the title is really evocative, and I loved saying it right from the beginning. There's a feeling of kind of taking back the word. I grew up really afraid of the word bitch. It was as a child of feminists who grew up just knowing that it was one of the worst things you could possibly say. There was something so powerful about taking that term back in some way, owning it in a empowering way. Rachel's book was just one of the most relatable, funny novels I'd ever read. It felt like it was saying all of these things that were in my head that I didn't know we were allowed to say. And the process of adapting it was taking this book that I loved so much that was really not cinematic because it was such an internal thing, and finding ways to externalize it and bring my own life story into it and let it shift and grow into something that could be externalized and shown in a film version. Um, and Rachel was so supportive of that process. She was just incredible. She's such a generous, evolved human.
What were those conversations like with you? It sounds like she was pretty open to you saying, I don't want to do this part of your book. How do you like, what is that process and how long does it take you? Because it sounds daunting to me to sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to write a movie. I mean, that's years of dedication to your life. How do you decide this is the film that I'm going to, you know,
It's
put
a
that?
long process to decide where to put your energy, no doubt. Once I had settled on this book being something I wanted to adapt, Rachel was really open to the fact that I said, my process is I really have to work by myself and I need to just spend a lot of time not knowing what I'm going to do with it yet. And it's a process of really digesting her book and getting to know it so deeply that I almost feel like I can then let it go and start building it back from the ground up. And the script really comes from everything I've sort of internalized about her book. And then obviously bringing in my own life experiences and my own story to this, which this movie ended up being such a mashup of me and Rachel's experiences. And she was just so open to that creative process and recognizing that that would make the best film, that, a sort of translation of her book was not what was going to happen, but that it was going to really morph into something that was different and new, and that was just the creative process that we had to go through.
And it really dives into the difficulties that some people, particularly women, can have after having children. But it's also funny. And I want to be clear, it's not about regretting having children. I mean, it's about going into this mental space. So how did you sort of balance that humor and making sure people felt relatable to it, but it's like you still want your kids.
No doubt. Although I guess when I became a parent, I felt like nobody was really honest about saying like, but some days you regret it, or some days you feel like you're not sure if you made a huge mistake. And so there was part of me that wanted to be willing to say those things that we're not really supposed to say. I think there's this feeling, and maybe it's really in like mom culture of the like online blogs or the online worlds of parenting where like maybe you feel like you're not supposed to say certain things. You're not supposed to admit how hard it is. You're not supposed to admit how much of the time you feel like you don't know what you're doing, or how much of the time you feel like everyone else has it together. I mean, I've been a parent now for 10 years, and I feel like I look at other parents all the time and think, how are you doing this so well? Like, I can't remember the day that I'm supposed to send them with this snack and that they're supposed to wear these certain colors. And I'm also supposed to be working on my next movie and trying to figure out what time to pick them up to bring them to ballet. And it's all too much. And I'm so privileged and I know that, but like I don't ever feel like I'm doing it right. And so there's something really like great about letting go of that artifice and just being like, this is so fucking hard. This is impossible. How do I do this well? That felt really good in the making of it. And to me does feel funny. It's like there is a lot of parenting that when you're in it feels painful, but the moment you can step back from it a little bit, my friend's son used to just always pull poop out of his diaper and like show it to her. And one day they were in Home Depot and he walked up to her and was like, look, mom, poop. And to her in that moment, it was horrifying, but to me, it was really funny. And so I put that in this script. And there's just a million different experiences like that, that in the moment feel like impossible to deal with. But with a little bit of space, you can recognize how funny they are.
And how do you decide you want to direct it as well? Is that something you knew going into it right away? Like, oh, I'll direct it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. This felt very much like my movie that I needed to make, that felt, in a lot of ways, this is the most personal movie I've ever made. It feels like I put the most of my own marriage and life and experience with my son, particularly, into this movie. Um, so yeah.
And what does it feel like then to get Amy Adams, a six-time Oscar nominee, one of the greatest actors we have right now? And this is a bold role for her too. I mean, she takes it
Oh,
to a different level.
she is so wonderful and she's so vulnerable. And I feel like she really trusted me to let me in the way that she did. She's very vulnerable. It's such a, I don't know, it's such an intimate portrait of what it is to be an aging woman, to allow herself to be seen in certain ways. She grew out this like hair coming out of a mole on her chin and let me film it. And I just was blown away by her every day and how much she was willing to let us see her and see, the sometimes complicated look of being an aging woman and being a mother and how it's not always pretty.
And you get criticized online for that stuff. I mean, that's just the society that we live in is
Society that we live in is not comfortable even admitting that women have bodies that change in age at all, and or that menstruate or that rip open when we give birth or any of these things, which we as women don't think is a radical thing to talk about. It's just, one Tuesday a month or whatever. So it's something we're pretty used to.
she Nightbitch has different sort of meanings throughout the movie. I mean, the way she talks about it with her husband a little bit, and then what she can actually become. She does become a dog for part of it. How did you decide what dog to make her? Because she's a really cute dog. She could have been a Saint Bernard, a poodle. How did you decide on that dog?
We went through a number of different dogs of what she could be, and it was interesting having read the book how everybody had a different version in their head, of course. And there was also versions where we would have never seen if she became a dog, or it was more, where you could have just left it up to the imagination and never really seen it. I loved the idea of her being almost like a wolf-like husky with red in her coat because of Amy's hair. And then it turned out that that wasn't a dog that was really available from all of the trainers and everybody that I talked to. So we ended up searching rescue organizations and they found this dog and adopted her and trained her for 5 months for the movie,
Wow.
then kept her. And she's the most incredible dog. But there was just something about her, as I just looked on the internet at all these different types of dogs and different feelings I got when looking at dogs, it was so clear. Like, I didn't want it to be like a little dog. I wanted it to have this like ferociousness to it, but still be beautiful. And this feeling of like a dog who could run fast and was like in its body and felt powerful. And this dog just felt like the right dog.
And I don't want to give too much away, but what was the inspiration in, or I guess your train of thought in showing her transition? Because I mean, you don't go full Teen Wolf here in this movie, but we do like the eyes and there are certain aspects to it. What's makeup, what's visual effects, and how did you decide how far you want to really push that?
A lot of it is makeup, some of it is visual effects. It was a huge process in the writing, and I think I wrote many different versions of how this could have played out in terms of how much you see versus how much you don't. And ultimately, I landed on this feeling that it would feel, in a lot of kind of monster movies or transformation movies, there's a painful element to the transformation that might happen. There's this like ripping and
Yeah.
this sense of like skin being torn off, and whether it's The Fly or Werewolf in London or whatever. And yet the emotion for me behind this was that it's an exuberant, cathartic thing when she becomes a dog. In the book, it feels good when she becomes a dog. She feels her muscles move. She feels more connected to her body. There's a power in it. It's not a painful being ripped feeling. So it was like, how do we make this transition feel exuberant? And I came up with this sort of metaphor idea of digging, that so much of what she's doing in her life is like trying to excavate and digging into her past and digging into her mother and her story of her grandmother, her lineage. She's digging through the past of her past self, who she was as an artist, who she's become, and that dogs dig, and that the process of digging is what sort of lets her transform. And so that then I came up with this idea of physically digging in her yard, and that led to the idea of what we see with the transformation.
And we also see her getting a better understanding of her own mother. Does that happen when you have children, as you start to understand your parents?
I think anyone who's become a parent, you see your own childhood and your own parents through a different lens, no matter what. It may be that you see, this is how I don't want to do things, or it may be that you see like, oh my God, they did so much for me. But you gain an understanding of your own childhood and parenting that you really can't gain unless you do that experience, unless you become a parent. I mean, I don't think everyone needs to become a parent by any means, but I do think there is this perspective that you gain when you become a parent, where you see your own parents through a totally different eyes. And often, I've seen a lot of my girlfriends who became parents and their mothers are no longer with them. And there's a pain to becoming a mother without your own mother there to witness that shift. And that was something that I thought could just add to her isolation and sense of identity shift that's happening, and the kind of pain of that. And then there's also part of you that just taps into this like ancient wisdom that you had, that your mother had and your grandmother had. When you go through birth and everyone says to you like, it will take over, you will just know how to do it. And it's true, there is ancient instincts that come into you that are very animal. You don't have to learn how to do those things. I mean, there's a lot of techniques you can learn around giving birth, but it will happen, and you will be tapped into something that the women who came before you were able to do. And there's something really powerful about that. And it also goes way against, I think, the way most of us tend to think of ourselves and our bodies, which is like, I'm a logical person who chooses to do these things, who goes to the gym and moves my body in these certain ways. And then to have it be like, okay, but now it's really your animal self who's going to take over and tell you how to do this really intense act.
Well, now you've got Amy Adams. You've directed some films that have given actors some of their best performances. Tom Hanks, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, Melissa McCarthy, Richard E. Grant, both nominated for Oscars for Can You Ever Forgive Me? How does your experience as an actor impact how you are as a director, or how do you think that relationship works for you?
I mean, I think there's no doubt that me being an actor is a bit of a superpower when it comes to being a director, because I know what I'm asking of the actors. I know how difficult what I'm wanting them to do is, and yet I'm still pushing them and asking them to do something that they're maybe not totally comfortable with. But I think because I love actors and have a sort of real experience and appreciation of what they do, there's probably more there. We speak a similar language, and I can kind of ask certain things of them that maybe I wouldn't be able to ask of them otherwise.
Well, it's been fun to watch, and Nightbitch is another success. So we're looking forward to that coming out in theaters December 6th. And Marielle, good luck with everything this award season, and thanks for chatting with Gold Derby today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.